So this is the brand new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, and after making nearly 1,000 photos with this smartphone, unfortunately, there is a lot that I dislike about this camera as a professional photographer, and it's not something I can recommend to most people, especially when I compare it to the S24 Ultra. So let's talk about it. And big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. So real quick backstory on my intention as a creator and how this smartphone versus professional photographer series came to be. You see, it started out as just a way for me to compare new smartphones like the new iPhones to my mirrorless cameras just to see how good is this technology getting. But over the last year, this series has evolved into a way to dive deeper into the cameras on smartphones. You see, camera performance is always one of the top selling points when it comes to smartphones. Everyone wants to know, is the camera better? These companies are always promoting improvements to their cameras, but is it an actual improvement or is it just marketing? And unfortunately, in typical tech review videos, nothing against these reviewers, they have a lot to talk about, they don't get as deep as they can into the technology in these smartphones. You see, smartphone cameras are extremely powerful, but unfortunately it is still technology that is emerging and growing, and there are pitfalls to this technology that are oftentimes glazed over in the marketing and missed by tech reviewers because who has the time to go through all this? You're looking at the person, me. I put a lot of time into these videos, so if you enjoy them, do me a solid, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you are not yet. Now, the S25 Ultra, my anticipation with this smartphone was that it was gonna be just like the previous iPhone. You see, with the last iPhone, we saw some improvements to the cameras, but overall, it was just a minor bump up. And at the end of that review of the iPhone 16 Pro, I said, if you wanna buy this because you have an older model, by all means, go for it. But at the end of the day, it's not something groundbreaking and worth you going from a 15 to a 16.4. And before I even had the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra in my hand, I assumed that it was going to be a similar situation. The S24 Ultra was amazing, award-winning. I absolutely loved that smartphone camera, and I thought this would be just a minor improvement with the addition of the 50 megapixel ultra-wide lens, and that would be it. And the first day I took this camera out to test it in North Georgia, I got results that pretty much matched my expectation. The normal wide lens on this camera, the native focal length that is similar to 24mm, looked great. It looked basically the same as the S24 Ultra, and the same thing with the telephoto lens. These images were solid, nothing groundbreaking, and no major improvements in my opinion. But I did notice something in editing that is a huge negative for someone like me, but we'll talk about that in a second. And it's also important to mention that when I do these test videos, I always capture my photos in RAW, because RAW is how you turn a smartphone into a professional camera. RAW files allow you to edit the files, get all the data, and essentially turn the camera in your pocket into something extremely powerful that at times can replace any other camera on the market. But when I was doing this initial test, I noticed something a little bit funny with the ultra-wide photos when I was shooting at 50 megapixels. I couldn't really tell what was going on with this first test. It just seemed like something was off. So I took the camera out into the city and I went to some familiar locations just to see, am I crazy or is there really something going on here? And for good measure, I did do a few more tests with the normal wide angle lens, and these images looked great in the city as well. Nothing to really report back. But when I started testing this ultra wide lens at 50 megapixels, I noticed there was a lot of distortion and fringing and weird artifacting going on in the corner of these images, especially in low light situations. I noticed the darker the conditions got, the worse these problems appeared with these ultra wide photos. And when I compare the ultra wide lens at 50 megapixels on the S25 Ultra to the experience I had with the Google Pixel 9 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro, I didn't get that same real burst of improvement. The photos didn't scream to me, hey, these are a lot better. They actually felt a little bit worse. So I went out to another location with the S25 Ultra, the S24 Ultra, and the iPhone 16 Pro to make some ultra wide photos. And I realized there is something going on with the 50 megapixel files in the S25 Ultra, especially when you compare them to the S24 Ultra, which is only a 12 megapixel camera at ultra wide. And at this point I started thinking, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, maybe I'm being a little too critical, maybe I got a device that's not working properly. There's no way I'm going to prefer images from the smartphone from a year ago versus the one that that just came out. And remember, this is a $1,300 smartphone, so this isn't just money you want to throw away. So to test this a little bit further, I went out to another location to make a photo that isn't the prettiest image, but it's a very good test to see what the quality of images is like. Now, with this test, what I did was an image shot on the S25 Ultra at 12 megapixels with the ultra wide lens, and an ultra wide photo at 12 megapixels with the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. And when you compare these two photos together, they look relatively similar. Maybe you could argue the S24 Ultra looks a little bit better when you're shooting RAW, but for the most part, both of these 12 megapixel images look very similar. It's not until you bump the resolution to 50 megapixels that you start noticing this insane fringing in the corners. It is so obviously clear that the 50 megapixel files from the S25 Ultra at ultra wide versus the S24 Ultra at 12 megapixels and the 25 at 12 megapixels is not as good. There is something going on with these 50 megapixel files at ultra wide. The quality is not there. But the strange caveat here is when you capture images in JPEG, which is what most people are going to use the camera for, including other tech reviewers, there is little noticeable difference between the 50 megapixel, 12 megapixel, and the S24 Ultra files as well. So this has something to do with raw processing with the files on the S25 Ultra, especially when you're using 50 megapixels. The main camera upgrade that Samsung is selling with the S25 Ultra is actually negatively impacting photos. Now, I have some speculation as to why that is and what is causing this, and I want to talk about some other negatives that I don't love about the S25 Ultra that I noticed in processing all of these images. But before I do that, I briefly want to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. So if you're making photography with a smartphone, I'm sure the idea has crossed your mind of how can I make a little bit of money with this? And the easiest way to make money with your photography is to have a professional looking website, and no one makes it easier to build a website than Squarespace. Squarespace is what I use to host my website, evanramp.com, which is where I sell my photo prints as well as my photography book. And one great thing about Squarespace is with the introduction of Squarespace payments, you can manage all your transactions in one place without having to switch platforms. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, dude, I don't know how to build a website. I'm not a web designer. Neither am I. Squarespace has award-winning templates that are so easy to customize and give your business a professional look. And with the introduction of Fluid Engine, you can literally drag things around on the screen and completely customize your site. And if you're looking to take things to the next level, Squarespace introduced Design Intelligence, which is a cutting-edge AI tool that allows you to get inspiration for your design utilizing the 20 years of web design experience that Squarespace has to offer. So whether you're a seasoned professional looking to take your business to the next level, or you're a complete beginner looking to just showcase your work, have somewhere to show your photography outside of social media and algorithms, Squarespace is the easiest solution for you. And I have a bunch of videos on this channel breaking down a number of different ways to use Squarespace step by step. They are all linked in the description down below. I definitely recommend checking out the one about how to sell prints, and I recommend the one about portfolio building. But while you're following one of those videos, go to squarespace.com/evanramp to start a free trial and use code evanramp to save 10% at checkout when you send your site live. That's squarespace.com/evanramp to start a free trial and use code evanramp to save 10% at checkout when you're ready to sign up. Big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. So I'm not 100% sure what is causing this issue with the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra's new and in quote proved ultra wide lens at 50 megapixels, but if I had to speculate, the decrease in quality might have to do with simply how the images are being processed by the phone. You could not have a true RAW file here. You could have a JPEG XL file. There could be something going on with the actual sensor not being optimized for this higher megapixel count, which is something we see sometimes with mirrorless cameras. As you get into higher megapixels, you have more issues with artifacting and noise and ISO sensitivity. But I personally think the main reason we're seeing this decrease in quality here has to do with how the images are just being written as a file. When I look back at my S24 Ultra RAW files in Lightroom, something I loved about that camera was how easy the files were to edit, because the picture profile could remain an Adobe Color or Adobe Standard picture profile, meaning if you're a photographer, you can replicate your editing style on RAW files from the S24 Ultra. This is not the case with the S25 Ultra. The S25 Ultra has a standard picture profile of color, making these images a little bit more difficult to edit. In my opinion, the photos from the S24 Ultra edited a lot better than the S25 files. Compared to the S24 Ultra, the S25 does have improvements. There's an improved chip, it's faster, it's a smoother phone. These changes didn't really impact photo processing. I didn't see a change there, but it is a little bit of a better phone when it comes to what it can do. But the changes to the camera are not really there. So other than the addition of raw video, which is a cool feature if you're going to use it, this camera feels the exact same as the S24 Ultra, unless you're going to use the ultra wide lens at 50 megapixels, which we already talked about in the video, has somewhat of a negative impact on the photos, and it's not something that I enjoyed using, which means this camera, if you use it the right way to get the best pictures, is going to be used the exact same way with the exact same formats as the S24 Ultra, making this kind of a useless upgrade for photographers. And not to be like conspiracy theory here, but based on my testing and what I saw, it just seems like Samsung took the S24 camera, put it in the S25, but they can't say, hey, it's the exact same camera, buy a new phone, so they slapped on this quote-unquote resolution upgrade that's just not really there, hoping to sell more phones with all these minor improvements. And I know this video is a little bit overly technical. The average person isn't using RAW files. They don't care about things like picture profiles, but I think it's important to show people that all these new camera upgrades and smartphone upgrades coming out every year are not always something you have to get. Even though they're saying it's the latest and greatest, it might not be. It might just be last year's model, slightly repackaged to make you think you're missing out on something and you got to spend more money. So here's my final thoughts on the S25 Ultra after all this testing. If you're someone who is hardcore about photography, you care about stuff like picture profiles, Lightroom editing, all the small details that go into making the pictures the best they possibly can be, the S25 Ultra is not an upgrade. The S24 Ultra is a much better phone for photography. So if you're someone who already has the S24 Ultra and you're thinking about upgrading to this for the camera capabilities, don't bother, wait for the next one. The 50 megapixel camera on this is, in my opinion, just marketing. It's not improving the photos at all. But if you're someone who's a little bit more casual, maybe you have an older smartphone, you're looking to upgrade, you're going to be fine going with the S25 Ultra. You're going to be splitting hairs trying to find the difference between this and the S24 if you're not really trained and really, like I said, hardcore about photography. And if you're trying to save a little bit of money, the S24 Ultra is a great option as well, and the camera performance is, based on the testing, almost exactly the same, and in my opinion better than the S25 Ultra. So let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. Do me a solid, please hit the thumbs up button on this video and subscribe if you are not yet. When videos like this don't go according to plan and I have to validate an issue that I see with something, it's actually really tedious, and I don't enjoy making test photos of power lines to show y'all what I'm talking about. But my goal here is to make sure you have informed decisions around the things that you are buying and you're not wasting money on tech that is not necessary, especially when it comes to making pictures. So let me know your thoughts on the S25 Ultra in the comments. I'll catch y'all in the next video.